anybody else can join us when they arrive. So welcome everybody to this lecture organized by the European Union of Yoga. We are very pleased this evening to have François Lorin with us. François gave his talk 2 weeks ago in French, so we're very pleased that he's agreed to give it again in English so that more people can benefit from it. François Lorin, I'm sure you are all familiar with him, well known in the EUY community. He's been teaching yoga, training yoga teachers for over 50 years. And today he's going to be giving us the benefit of his long years of studying and reflecting. And we're telling us a little bit about the links, the convergences between three writers, three texts, from Patanjali to Krishnamurti and Nisargadatta. Nisargadatta. Thank you, François. Over to you for the next hour or so. I think François is going to talk for about an hour, and then we can have questions at the end of that hour. If you can put your hand up and ask them, or you might want to put them in the chat as you prefer.
Thank you, Joy. And thank you, Joanna. And welcome to everyone. I hope my English will, in spite of the French accent, be understandable by everyone. I am going to share my screen so that during the topic you can read as well as listen. Sometimes listening is not so easy. And at the end, or later on, all the registered people will get the complete text so that you can read again in case some of the things have escaped your attention. So I tried to share the screen. I hope it will work this time. Just have to open. Here it is. Okay. Tell me if you see. My screen says you can see my screen. Is it so?
Yes.
Okay.
You can see it. Yep.
Thank you. So when the team that organized this topic of yoga and spirituality asked me to participate, I first looked at the etymology of, in French, spirit, which is here in English, mind. And I was interested to see the last part of the etymology of the mind, which is in philosophy, the notion of spirit is at the heart of so-called spiritualist traditions. And I wondered if yoga was a spiritualist tradition or not. It has become in history, but at the time of Patanjali, or at least in the Yoga Sutra, I don't know if it really fit with the idea of spirituality. Since in metaphysics and in religions, the word spirit normally designates the immaterial element embodied in the human being. Well, then, if we accept that Purusha is an immaterial element embodied in the human being, the answer is yes. And the etymology of spirituality, the Wikipedia, my source, says that spirituality has different meanings today. In the West, it relates to religion from the perspective of human beings in relation to higher beings and the salvation of the soul. Well, this might be interpreted in the light of the Yoga Sutra, but I think it's not quite the way Patanjali presents the story of a person who wants to follow the path of yoga. From a philosophical point of view, to the opposition of matter and spirit, this is really Western. It does not apply to Indian thinking. And it also designates the quest for meaning, hope, or liberation, and the processes associated with it, initiations, rituals, personal development, new age. The word liberation here has a lot to do with the path of yoga, so I think it fit. It can also, and more recently, be understood as dissociated from religion or faith in a God, to the point of evoking a spirituality without religion or a spirituality without God. The background of the Yoga Sutra is the Sankhya philosophy. And in the Sankhya philosophy, it is stated, at least in the strophe, I don't know how you say strophe in English, of Ishvara Krishna, yes, as God as being unnecessary to explain the totality of what is. But in Yoga Sutra, there is the Ishvara Pranidhana in the first chapter, so we'll have to come to it a little later, but it seems that even if yoga is not as such a religion, and even if it has been part of religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, and even Islam, and maybe also Christianity more recently, it is also in France spirituality without God, because most people here at least are not believers in God. I just put a few words of my own life to show you that for me, the meeting of Jiddu Krishnamurti was a very important moment in my life. I met him for the first time in New Delhi in 1963, and this meeting left a deep impression on me. And actually, it is after meeting with him privately that I decided to teach yoga. He suggested it to me, although he didn't know exactly the philosophy of yoga, but he was practicing yoga asanas and pranayama with Iyengar first, and then with Deshikachar later. And I started learning yoga with Deshikachar in 1966, at the time when he started, maybe 67, he started giving classes to Krishnamurti also. With regard to Nisargadatta Maharaj, I heard about him when I was studying yoga in Madras, but failed to meet him in person. I read his book, I Am That, several times. And that was also a very strong influence. Just a short presentation for those of you who don't know Nisargadatta Maharaj. He was born in March 1897 and died on the 8th of September 1981. A few of his words: instead of looking for what you don't have, find what you never lost. And it was by imagining yourselves separate that you created the division. You don't have to cross it, just don't create it. This is, to me, very important, because we are creating division all the time with the process of thinking, And here he invites us to stop it. Then you exist as pure presence, supreme principle beyond mind and body. Stay like that. Then, and this is also very important, everything is because you are. This seems in a way difficult to understand, because when he says everything is because you are, we interpret it as the me, the ego, while it is not what he points to. He points to this pure presence that we are beyond mind and body. And also, my words cannot fail. They will shatter the concepts of anyone who listens to them. And if you have the opportunity to go to YouTube, and there is one short movie showing Maharaj teaching, it is worthwhile listening and seeing this video. Something that we can hear very often now from people that teach, for instance, Vedanta, you are already what you seek. This also is a very important point, because evidently it is not the part of us that believes is limited, that is what we seek. But what we seek, we already are, since we are this presence, even if we are not yet aware of it. Again, what binds you is taking yourself for what you are not, which is exactly what I said, thinking we are this limited entity, which is the outcome of centuries and millennia of beliefs in the human, in humanity. Then also, the only difference between you and me is that I know myself as I am. And then the last point, which I feel is very important also, in the world of events, that means in the parinama world, the question happens, the answer happens, everything happens, nothing happens to me. That is all. So if we have seen, at least intellectually, but that is not enough, that we are the seer, that we are the drashta or the rashtra, as Patanjali puts it in the first chapter in the Sutra 3, number 3. We are the eternal witness of what is happening, and what is happening, no need to find out why and how, because there is no reason behind what is happening. We just have to see that it is happening as it happens. That is for Nisargadatta. And now for Krishnamurti. He was born in December 1895 and died on the 17th of February 1986 in Ojai, California. I don't want to go into his story, but I just want to point out how strong was his first teaching when he decided to dissolve the Order of the Star that was created by the Theosophists, since they thought he was the new Messiah. So he says, truth is a land without roads, which cannot be reached by any road, whatever it is, no religion, no sect. This is my point of view, and I maintain it absolutely and unconditionally. Truth being unlimited, unconditioned, unapproachable by any path, cannot be organized. Organizations should therefore not be created which encourage man to follow a particular path. Truth is thus shrunk and turned into a plaything for the weak, for those whose discontent is only momentary. Truth cannot be lowered to the level of the individual, but rather the individual must make the effort to rise up to it. You cannot bring the top of the mountain into the valley. If you want to reach it, you have to go through the valley, climb the steep slopes without fearing the danger of the precipice. You must ascend toward the truth. It cannot be lowered towards you. At a time when the yoga world is being more and more organized, with more and more institutions like federations or European Yoga Union and so on are growing everywhere. Some are more respectable than others. I think we have to remember that the transmission of yoga must be not through organizations, but through teaching that is independent of organizations. Organization must be necessary to organize the profession of yoga teacher, which is something new in the story of yoga. But it is not this way that the transmission of yoga will perdure or continue, according to me at least. So, a few links I want to create between the teachings of Maharaj and Krishnamurti and Patanjali. Nisargadatta states, in the mirror of your mind, all kinds of images appear and disappear. Knowing that they are all your own creations, silently watch them come and go. Be alert without being disturbed. This attitude of silent observation is the true foundation of yoga. So you look at the picture, but you are not the picture. This, to me, is a very understandable illustration of the Yoga Sutra, first chapter, second sutra, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. You cannot stop or direct the activities of the mind, but you can watch, you can see the images, the thoughts, the emotions, the judgments, the commentaries, the endless inner noise made by thinking. And if you keep this watchful attitude at one moment or the other, you realize that you are looking at the picture, but you are not the picture. Otherwise, you are the picture, like the Sutra 4 of the first chapter says, Vritti Sarupyam Itaratra. At any other moment, there is identification with the movement of the mind. About Svadhyaya, which is the first sutra of the second chapter, which is now, for at least the students of Deshikachar, understood as chanting, for instance, Vedic chanting, or recitation of the Yoga Sutra. The real meaning of Svadhyaya is a study of oneself. If you see the etymology, Adhyaya, a lesson, Sva, about oneself. And I like what Nisargadatta says about it. The reward of self-knowledge is freedom from the personal self. You cannot know the knower, for you are the knower. The fact of knowing proves the knower. You need no other proof. So I don't know if you see the truth of this statement. The fact of knowing proves the knower. Since we know, it shows that we are ultimately the knower of everything. The knower is not somebody who accumulates knowledge. The knower is the one that at all time watch the processes of the mind, which creates the appearance of a world outside, which creates all kinds of relationships, which creates all kinds of thoughts, and all this is known by the knower that we are. The knower of the known is not knowable. Just like the light is known in colors only, so is the knower known in knowledge. And he continues, true attention, the Sanskrit word that he used in the book for this true attention is the word samvid. Interesting because the root is Ved, like in Veda. Most people translate this root as to know. But one of the very important meaning of the verb Ved is to see. So true attention is to be a seer, not someone who accumulates knowledge. True attention is a state of pure observation without any attempt to act in any way on the observed. This is very often repeated by Krishnamurti also. And in yoga, there is this tendency that we want to change things. We want to become better. We want to follow some rules that have been suggested in behavior, like the yamas, instead of just watching exactly the way we are and seeing that what we think we are just images in the mind. We are the observer of what is happening in the mind. We are not the mind and its contents. This has to do with, it seems to me, the sutras 13 and 14 of the second chapter, when Patanjali speaks about abhyasa, which is very often translated as exercise or practice. But the etymological meaning of abhyasa is as follows. Is the verb as, which means to be, but to be unchanging, eternal, without any movement, contrarily to the verb pu, which means to be in parinama, in endless change. And abhyasa is defined in yoga as yatnaha stitau, an effort to remain in stability. Now, if you look at the body, there is no stability. You can stay still for a few moments. When you are in deep sleep, it seems that the body is not moving, but you are not aware of it while you are in deep sleep. Only you can observe it in somebody sleeping next to you. But all the rest of the time, the body is moving in one way or the other, be it only the breath, which is also there during deep sleep, actually. The mind, as you know, whether it is thinking, whether it is emotions, is moving also all the time. So when Patanjali points out to the need to make an effort to remain in sthiti, in stability, it points out to the only stable aspect of our existence, which is what he calls Purusha, or the seer, Drasha. Now, in the same direction, Jiddu Krishnamurti on pure observation. This means being attentive to your own reactions, becoming aware of them, and creating a space that opens up to the sound of your own rhythm. Also listen to the outside. It is a global process. a unitary listening movement. It is an art that requires the most extreme attention. For when one listens thus, there is no longer any listener. I don't know if you have had this experience of listening so intently to something, for instance, music, if you like music, that you completely lose consciousness of being someone separated from the music. This situation is actually described in the Yoga Sutra, at least in two places. In the first chapter, I think it is the Sutra, if I remember, yes. Patanjali says about Nirvitarka Samapati, Swarupa Shunyam Eva Artha Matra Nirbhasa. This, if I want to translate, is only the magnificence of the fact or the object remains as if the mind was empty of its own form. But this can happen only when there is smriti parishuddha, complete cleansing of memory. This is a very important topic, but I will come back later when we will see through other texts what Krishnamurti says about memory. So for when one listens thus, there is no longer any listener. There is only a lucid perception of the fact, of the authenticity of the fact or its falsity. If you really want to explore this mystery that is the nature of a truly religious and meditative brain, you have to know how to listen, to be extremely attentive to everything. It is like a huge river flowing as far as the eye can see. In the modern time, there are so many factors of dispersions that unless we learn how to simply attend and listen to what is happening, we are desperately caught in this stream of events, and we lose contact with the capacity to listen. If the ego is at work, true meditation is impossible. It is essential to understand that these are not mere words. The fact is indeed real. Meditation is the process by which the mind empties itself of all egocentric activity, of all activity of the me. If you don't understand how the me works, your meditation will lead you only to delusion and falsehood, and to more and more marked distortions. To understand what meditation is, you have to understand how the ego works. As long as the ego will be at work, as long as the me will exist in the form of observer, controller, expression of a will, as long as the ego will exist and its desire, its thirst for experiences, meditation will be nothing more than a way to self-hypnotism, to escape everyday life, to escape all suffering, all problems. As long as these activities exist, lies will inevitably be in order. See the reality of fact, not words, that anyone wishing to explore meditation, to see what it is, must first understand all forms of ego activity. One of the most ardent demands, cravings of spirit, is the desire to transform what is into what ought to be. Not knowing what to do with what is because it is powerless to find solutions to it, the mind forms an idea of what should be. It therefore projects itself into an ideal. The projection is the antithesis of what is, hence the conflict between the reality of facts and the ideal. This conflict is the vital breath, the very blood of the ego. In the world of yoga, this is so common that we project the opposite of what we are because we don't know what to do with our violence, with our thirst for experiences, for demand of being loved and so on, that we do with our mind what we have learned to do in practical life. In practical life, if something does not work, a machine, for instance, you can project it to repair it. And if you have the knowledge, you do it yourself. If you don't have the knowledge, you ask somebody else to do it for you. But within the field of the mind, it does not work like this. First, nobody can repair your mind but yourself. No psychologist, no psychiatrist, no religious man, no guru can repair your mind. It is your own care and attention that can do the job. And this is done only if you stay with what is instead of projecting what should be, which creates, as he says, conflict. And I was very interested when I studied the second chapter, the Ashtanga Yoga with Deshikacha, when we started learning yamas and niyamas. I said to him, this is impossible. Ahimsa, Satya, Asteya, and so on. Human beings are not like that. He said, yes, right. This is not a proposal, a kind of ethics that you have to follow. It is the picture of a realized yogi. And it is there just to show to help you to see how you are exactly in a way in comparison with this picture. I don't know if comparison is right, but at least it was not proposed by Deshikacha as something that has to be followed. Because this we know it doesn't work. Religion have tried to make people better by edicting forms of morality and ethics that one is supposed to follow. But it works only when things are going fine. And as soon as there is a real problem, a stress, like your life is in danger, everything goes away. So I think this is important to understand. Another activity of the ego is that of wanting. One wants to become, one wants to change. Wanting is a form of resistance that has been instilled in us from childhood and which has taken on enormous importance for us economically, socially, and religiously. Wanting is a form of ambition, which gives rise to the desire for control, such a thought controlling another, such activity of thought controlling another. I must control my desires. The I is a store of memories and experiences brought together by thought under the term me. That thought wants to control, shape, deny another thought. So that brings me back to the idea of smriti parishuddha, complete cleansing of the memory that is suggested by Patanjali in order to come to that situation where there is no division between a thought as the observer and the fact observed or the thing observed. The I is a store of memories and experiences. So cleansing completely the memory cannot mean forgetting our language, forgetting how to drive a car or how to behave properly in society, but it has to do with psychological memories. We all make a fuss about our life, how ill-treated we have been in childhood or well-treated, what happened to us is so much important, while the total story of mankind is important, but the story of each individual is only a very small part of that totality. And if we spend our time and our energy staying caught in our story, this division of the observer and the observed will continue, and the conflict that goes with it will continue. So it is important to see whether we can free ourselves from psychological memory. Another point that I feel is interesting to see in relation to Patanjali, now it is Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I have just put the initials. The here is everywhere, and the now is always. The here is everywhere. Wherever you go, it is the here. And the now is always. The past and the future exist only in thinking. At each moment of time, the now is the only reality that exists. Go beyond the notion I am the body, and you will discover that space and time are in you and not you in space and time. Obviously, me as ego says that is completely silly. But when he says, you will discover that space and time are in you, he doesn't speak of the ego, he speaks of the seer. That which in us is the knower or the watcher of everything. Watch the movement in space and the movement in time. Obviously, there is a time independent of the psychological processes of the mind, which is the cycles of nature, like the seasons. But time as a psychological reality has no meaning. Psychologically, there is only now, and past is only memory, and future is only projection. When you understand this, the major obstacle to realization will have been removed. This, for me, points out to one sutra, which is the Sutra 52 of the 3rd chapter, where Patanjali states that by putting our attention, which is the way I translate samyamat, by samyama, by the full attention on kshana, that means the instant, the now, and its modification, the krama, there is the knowledge, jnanam, born of the viveka, of our capacity to see clearly. And this capacity to see clearly is in the mind. It is in the buddhi. It is in this intelligence that is shared by all human beings, but more or less clouded. He states something else, which is a kind of proposal which, as yoga teachers and yoga practitioners, we should experiment. Be still, unperturbed, and wisdom and power will come by themselves. No need to hang on. Wait in silence of heart and mind. It is very simple to keep still. What is very rare is to want it. Remain unambitious, desireless, exposed, vulnerable, unprotected, uncertain, and alone, totally open and welcoming life as it comes, devoid of the selfish belief that everything is there to bring you pleasure or profit, material or so-called spiritual. This brings me to create a link with the Sutra 15. I dropped the 16 because it is too complicated, which is the one that defines Vairagyam. Now, raga in Sanskrit means desire, attraction, and comes from the root ranch, which means to be colored in red. And Vairagyam means an extreme absence of this raga. And Patanjali defines it like this. Vitrishnasya, total absence of thirst. Vishaya, for the objects. Drishta, perceived. Anushravika, object we have heard about. Whether it is a country you have been told about, how beautiful it is, how nice people are there, like Bhutan, for instance, and you decide to go there, this will be Anushravika, or something like enlightenment, freedom. This kind of thirst is the Anushravika thirst, while the Drishta thirst, it is obvious. And you see a nice dress in a shop, you want to buy it. You see a nice car, you want to buy it. Why not? But that is okay if you have the means. But otherwise, you trouble. And this absence, complete absence of thirst for these objects, is called that which master Vashikara. Vashikara, which masters samnya, or state of consciousness, makes us free. Nisargadatta still refuse to pay attention to things that come and go. Let them come and go. Thoughts and desires are also things. From time immemorial, the dust of events covered the clear mirror of your mind, and you could see only memories. Sweep away the dust before it can settle, and it will reveal the ancient layers to the point where you discover the authentic nature of your mind. Dispassion, detachment, being free from desires and fears, from self-centered concerns, pure attention, free from memory and expectation. This is the state of mind required for discovery to occur. Liberation, after all, is only the freedom to discover. The authentic nature of our mind, of your mind, our mind, Patanjali speaks about it in the first chapter, when in the Sutra 41, he states, Kshina vritehe, when the activities of the mind have been kshina means cut. The mind then is qualified as abhijatasya, born twice, or new, born again. This qualification is a reference to the Brahmanic tradition, where Brahmins and Kshatriyas are said to be born twice, from the womb of a mother, like all of us, and born from initiation. For the Brahmins, the three threads that represents the three gunas, and the Kshatriyas also have the initiation. And therefore, mind is said to be of noble birth. Mind contains the potential of clarity that is required to help us to free ourselves from the dust that has been accumulated as psychological memory and that make us believe that we are a separate individual in a world of endless turmoil and change. So he's qualified the mind as a manehe, as a crystal clear state, which tatsta tadanjanata, which takes the color of that on which it is put. So the mind can put itself on what is called grahya, the visible, that which we see around us. When we look at a tree, the mind being loaded with memory will not see the tree only. It will see the tree through the word. The word will create a judgment. This tree is beautiful, this tree is ugly, this tree is useful, this tree is useless. And it will create in the mind activities of imagination, how it will be nice to be able to rest under the shade of that tree, and so on and so on. So we never see the tree as a reality. So the mind, when it is cleared or cleansed from the past, is able to see the visible world as it is. But it can also see grahana. Grahana is the instrument of perception. That means itself. The mind can see its own processes clearly. It can see the vanity of most of its endeavor. While otherwise the mind is confused and does not see clearly its own activities. And for instance, will say, oh, you are responsible of my suffering. Doesn't see that the suffering is created by his own functioning. And most important, grahitru. Grahitru means that which sees. Well, if I translate correctly, these three words, grahitru, grahana, grahya, it is the racine griha, which means to hold. So that which is hold, that which allows to hold, and the holder. The holder here is the seer, is pure presence, is the knower that is known through knowledge, as Maharaj said earlier. And therefore, the mind is not our enemy. The mind is the greatest friend of human being, provided we have understood how loaded with the dust of memory it has become, and if we do the necessary to free itself, to help it to free itself of this dust. And one other point, still Nisargadatta Maharaj, you have not yet realized how painful your life is. You look like a child sleeping with a pacifier in your mouth. You can feel bliss for a moment being completely self-centered, but it is enough to look clearly at the face of human beings to realize the universality of suffering. Even your happiness is so vulnerable and brief. It is only a moment of respite, a simple interval between two sorrows. So this may sound very pessimistic. It resonates with the teachings of the Buddha, And it resonates also with the teachings of Patanjali, if you remember the Sutra 15 of the second chapter, which states that Dukkham eva sarvam vivekinaha. For the one who sees clearly, everything indeed is dukkha. Ill at ease, suffering, closed space, prison. Because of parinama, because we are confronted to endless change and we cannot rely on anything in this world that can last. Because of tapa. Tapa means the apparition of a new desire, endless search to satisfy something that once satisfied has no more any taste. Samskara, conditioning. You want to come out of a habit, whether of the mind or of the body, and you discover you are not able to. You are caught in it. So these are the parinama dukkha, samskara dukkha, plural dukkaihi, that are the universal cause of suffering in humanity, plus guna vritti virodat, cha. And because of the opposition, virodat, the fight, between the guna vritti, between the activities of the guna. As you know, the guna in the Sankhya philosophy are the three energies that are at work in this world of change. Tamas, which is an energy of inertia. Rajas, which is an energy of change. And sattva, which is an energy of revelation or understanding or transparency. These three are constantly fighting to get the first place. And therefore, we are never still, as suggests Nisargadatta, be still and perturbed, and wisdom and power will come by themselves, because we are not able to see that it is only the play of the gunas. It is said this way in the Bhagavad Gita. See that you are not the actor, you are the watcher of the play, the interplay of the gunas. One more point also about suffering, the cause of suffering. A questioner asked Maharaj, how does ignorance appear? Because in the Hindu culture, the cause of suffering, except for Buddhism, where the Buddha said it is thirst, it is desire which is the cause of suffering. But here, in Brahmanism, in yoga, and so on, the cause of suffering is ignorance or avidya, which may not be translated as only ignorance, but a false appreciation. So the questioner asks, how does ignorance appear? Maharaj, you want to cure the disease without having met the patient. Before asking this question about ignorance, should not you first inquire who is the ignorant? When you say you are ignorant, you fail to see that you have thus imposed the concept of ignorance upon the present state of your thoughts and feelings. Examine them as they arise. Give them your full attention, and you will find that it is not ignorance, but only inattention. Pay attention to what troubles you. That is all. After all, trouble is mental suffering, and all suffering is a demand for attention. As soon as you give your attention, the demand ceases and the question of ignorance vanishes. Rather than waiting for an answer, find out who is asking this question and why. You will immediately discover that it is the mind goaded by the fear of suffering, that asks this question. And in fear, there is memory and anticipation, past and future. Mindfulness brings you back to the present, and present presence is a state that is always available, though rarely achieved. This reminds us of what Patanjali says about pramanani, the means of achieving correct understanding in the Sutra 7 of the first chapter. The first means of acquiring understanding is to see directly things as they are, pratyaksha, which means aksha, the eye, going and coming, going to search for direct information. Of course, the ear does the same, the nose does the same, but here the eye is considered as the most potent indriya. So it goes and fetches information and bring it back. This is the first and foremost means of dispelling what we think is ignorance or avidya. Something is missing here. I will have to add now. Yes, Jiddu Krishnamurti. Okay. The outside world is my creation. I am not talking about the trees, the clouds, the bees, and the beauty of the landscapes, but about the relationships that exist in humanity, what we call society, that was created by you, by me. It is a fact that the world is me and that I am the world being the society in which I live, with its culture, its morality, its inequalities, and all the disheveled disorder that rages around us. All this is myself in action. It seems to me that this is an absolute and irrefutable fact. Now, this has been a motto in Krishnamurti's teaching, that every one of us is the totality of humanity. Every one of us is a memory of the total story of humankind since its beginning, and that all of us understand fear, jealousy, anger, and so on, and joy and love and so on, because we are all made of the same stuff. Human consciousness is one and the same, even if there are some differences. We are different in sex, different in size of the body, color of the skin, and so on and so on. But our minds are all made of the same stuff. And the stuff that is making our minds is avidya, as Patanjali states in the second chapter when he presents the kleshas. It's almost 1 hour. I have a choice to make now, because if I go to all the questions, we will not have time. So I will skip something. I did the same in French. Actually, I could not do it in 1 hour, but you will have the quotation so you can reflect yourself. Nisargadatta Maharaj. Question: is there a single thing of value in the entire universe? Maharaj: yes, the power of love. And Krishnamurti: love is a smokeless flame. The smoke is all we know so well. The smoke of jealousy, of anger, of addiction, of attachment, of the words personal or impersonal. We don't have the flame, but we know all about smoke so well. And also, to discover what love means, one must be free from all forms of possessiveness, attachment, jealousy, anger, hatred, anxiety. When we feel attachment, what are we attached to? Suppose one is attached to a table. You could have chosen something more significant, but what does this attachment imply? Pleasure, the pride of the owner, the ability to appreciate the usefulness, the beauty of the object, etc. If a human being is attached to his fellow man, what happens? When someone is very attached to you, how does the person who cares about you feel? In this attachment are mixed possessiveness, the feeling of domination, the fear of losing the other, hence jealousy, hence an ever greater attachment, an ever greater possessiveness and anxiety. But if there is no attachment, does that mean there is no love and no responsibility? For most of us, love implies a terrible conflict between human beings, and that is why the relationship becomes a source of perpetual anguish. This is what we call love. And to escape the terrible tension linked to this famous love, we have a whole range of distractions ranging from television to religion. We quarrel, after which we go to church, and when we get back, the argument begins again. It is an endless story. Now, I tried to find in Yoga Sutra something mentioning about love. In the Bhagavad Gita, you find it, but it is love of God. And love is not for God or for a flower or for a person. Love is a state. The only sutra which comes close to it is in the first chapter when I think it is, I will add it a bit, it is the Sutra 33 in the first chapter that speaks of Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, Upekshanam, Sukha, Dukkha, Punya, Punya, Vishayanam, Chitta, Prasadanam. The serenity of the mind comes from developing an attitude of friendly love, Maitri. It is love, but love as for a friend, with no jealousy supposed to come into the picture, or no comparison, or no judgment. Karuna, compassion. These two are really the qualities of a love that is beyond what most songs about love speak about. They speak about desire, they speak about jealousy, they speak about comparison and so on. But real love is Maitri and Karuna. And they are the characteristic of people who are open, Sukha, well at ease, from people who are orderly in our lives, Punya, and is joy part of love? And don't speak of joy, who has introduced the, but mudita means joy. Allégresse in French, I don't know how you translate allégresse in English. Joy, you can help me. Or Joella, I don't know. It's not merriment, allégresse, I don't know. And this is something that, yes, actually, the one who is in order within himself or herself knows joy. Karuna is more when you are in contact with somebody who is in deep suffering. If you love, then this love will be karuna. There will be compassion for that person. And the last part of this sutra is upeksha. Upeksha means to have a close look, but keeping a distance. This is with regard to people who have not put order in their lives and by consequence are source of disorder for everyone else around them and of course in themselves. The last point, I go a little over the hour, is a question that Krishnamurti has put. I was just before this listening to a talk between him and David Bohm, who spoke about the same item. In the gaze of silence, he says, I would now like to explore another question. Is there anything sacred in life that is part of this life? Is there anything sacred or holy in your life? Disregard the word sacred, forget the word, the image, the symbol of the sacred, which is very dangerous. And having done this, ask yourself this question. Is there something in my life really sacred? Or on the contrary, is everything superficial? Is everything only the fruit of thought? Thought is not sacred, is it? Do you believe that the thought and all that is the fruit of it are sacred things? We have been conditioned to believe it as Hindus, Buddhists, or Christians. We are conditioned to venerate, to adore, to address our prayers to simple objects born of thought and which we call sacred. The images in the temple in Hindu, the thought of the Buddha in Buddhism, the veneration for the Buddha in Buddhism, the image in the church in Catholicism, the veneration for the content of the Bible in both Judaism and Protestantism are all forms of veneration of thoughts created by human beings. The sacred is beyond that. And Patanjali has only one mention of the sacred, which is the sutra speaking about Ishvara Pranidhana. Ishvara Pranidhana Dva. He says yoga can be attained also or by complete dedication to Ishvara. Alors, Pranidhana, the meaning is to put Da in the most intimate part of ourselves, Ni, in the first place, Pra. And to place in the first place, in the most intimate part of ourselves, Ishvara. Ishvara is that which owns the power. So it could be a way of speaking about the sacred in the sense that this power is not the power of this world, the power of the king, the power of the Lord, as human beings have imagined the power of the Lord, the ultimate God, but that which detains the power, that which creates and destroys that each moment, which we cannot name, we cannot imagine, we cannot think about. It's a way of saying something which remains a mystery. I skipped the education about the education of yoga or transmission of yoga, but I will end with these few words of Krishnamurti about education, because I think yoga is a process of education, educating oneself, educating others. Krishnamurti, state control of education is a calamity. There is no hope of establishing peace and order in the world as long as education is at the service of states or churches. To learn is to want to progress, to be driven by a passion, an intense thirst for discovery. The purpose of education is to bring total freedom to the mind so that it is able to bring order to its own life, but also by this very process to bring about different social structures. This, I think, can be linked to the first sutra of the first chapter, Hatha Yoga Anushasana. Yoga, now learning. Yoga is learning now. Anushasana means a learning which has no doubt about its truth, and Hatha means now. It is not, as we have been told, that somebody is ready to listen to a teaching and somebody is ready to give a teaching, because the teaching is not given by somebody to somebody. Teaching is life listening to itself through the medium of a human body-mind. And so this learning, it takes place only now. This is how I will end my part. And I am now happy to listen if you have questions, although I feel it's not easy to put questions after such a complicated or heavy lecture. I will close I think I will close now the sharing.
Thank you, François.
Are there any questions?
I was wondering whether you could say any more about what you were mentioning there at the end about Krishnamurti, who has said that education should not be controlled by the state, should not be controlled by churches. It's a calamity if it is. So what were his answers? What were his solutions as an alternative to that?
A failure. A failure. The schools that were created by Krishnamurti, whether in India or in England, where I taught yoga for 2 years, or in Ohio, in California, they are remake of religions in a way, because human beings are such that they always create, like after Joshua or Jesus, the church was created, which completely deviated the very strong words that Jesus has said. The same way the Sangha, the Buddhist Sangha, has completely perverted the original teachings of the Buddha, if we know these teachings for real. It's so old that I'm not sure what he said. So in the schools that he has created that were supposed to develop a new form of education where kindness, respect, friendliness, closeness of the teachers and the students should develop, I don't think they have succeeded. That's why I say it's a failure. And to create, I mean, parents are unable also to give a good education, because we are all caught in this process of being egocentric individuals, believing that we are separate. And as parents, we are anxious to see our children not be happy, maybe, but at least succeed in a rotten society. So we don't give them the means to be free from the demands of the society, whether they are liberal society or communist society or tribal society. There is always the community, the collectivity that wants to survive through the individuals that makes for this collectivity. And therefore, the education is always at the service of the group and not at the service of the individual, so that it can become free. So maybe there is hope through yoga if we keep in mind that what is most important in the transmission of yoga is to allow people to find their own way and to be free of this how can I say that, of the way society try to make us like how do you say in a machine that makes a machine work? Rouage.
The cogs
Yes.
in a machine. Yeah.
Society or religion makes of us cogs so that the machine works. And this is not education. Thank you for the question.
Mm. And would you maybe say then, making a link with what you were saying a little bit about yoga, the organization of yoga, if you like, would you say that maybe sometimes yoga teacher training goes a little bit too much towards making people into those cogs as well? Is maybe there's a little bit too much of that in some yoga teacher training, or not?
I don't know. I cannot speak for the teacher training course than the one I do, but I think if in a teaching training course there is a stress put upon the importance of freedom, the importance of going beyond being a cog, that is okay. If a teacher training course is to make teachers that follow some form of, what can I say, standardization of yoga teaching. If it is limited only to posture and breathing, it is not yoga anyhow. It should not be called yoga. It should be called yogic exercise or something like that, but it is not yoga in its depths. So when Krishnamurti told me, because I asked him the question, what can I do of my life? My father was a businessman. I am not interested in business. He said, why don't you teach yoga? You have started learning. It is an art that may be lost. I understood it not as teaching asanas and pranayamas, although it is what I learned with the Shikacha together with the Yoga Sutra. I understood it as spreading the core of the Yoga Sutra, which is the same, according to me, as the teachings of the Buddha or the teachings of Jesus or the teachings of Krishnamurti, of all awakened beings. For me, this is the only way that yoga will not become simply one more type of superficial activity, not sacred activity.
Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to ask François a question? You can either put your hand up and ask your question, or maybe put it into the chat if you prefer. If anybody would like to do that, please do.
Hello, Iris.
Hello. Hello, Iris. How are you?
Hello, I'm great. Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'm sorry it's in the dark because I'm in the car.
Okay.
But it was a pleasure to hear that. Thank you so much. I would rather like support what you just said, because about the education, because also when we look at the education systems now in the Western world mainly, but I think it's all over the world, is really so much manipulated and created like even more than a machine, but but completely ruined the ability or the wish or the will to think alone or to feel alone or to experience alone. And I think this is something that if we are the savior, let's say, for humanity, it is a very hard job to create it again, to regress back and to create this need or this will in people. Because nowadays I can see that they are even don't want to search, don't want to, they don't have it. This the beginning of light to search.
Yes, nobody wants to take the trouble to the passion, does not have the passion to look for truth.
Yes, exactly. And it's a huge mission.
Well,
to
I don't know if it is
back.
a mission. I think it is something that comes out naturally if yourself you are passionate, but it doesn't mean that it will be effective. Wanting to be effective is again a manifestation of egocentric activity. So you do it out without the motivation that it succeeds. You do it because you cannot do otherwise, it seems to me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. True.
Thank you. And be careful when you drive.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a comment or a question for François before we close? No.
Okay, maybe you, yeah, there is a question. Thanks. If you have no question now, when you see again the recording and when you read the quotations and the notes, maybe you will have question. So Joy or Joanna, I don't know who will send it, you please add my mail address so that if people want to write to me, I will be pleased to answer by mail.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, thank you very much, François. We will be sending out the recording along with the notes that François was referring to there with the quotations, and there'll also be a short survey just asking for your feedback about the session. So you'll be receiving that by email. And I have to say that having listened to François twice now in French and in English, it is really a very useful process, I think, of just listening to it again. And I was just noticing as I was listening there how different things were striking me, or you were emphasizing different things. Yes. And that's been really great to listen to it twice. So I'm sure listening back to the recording again will be a good experience for everybody. And so thank you again to François. Thank you to Joanna for doing all the technical work, and thank to everybody for coming along and listening. And we hope to see you again. There'll be another talk on Friday at 5 o'clock if you're interested. So do join us again if you can. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you to everyone.
Thank you.